Today we're going to solve designer doormats, and this is a Python coding challenge. We have a grid. The size or the dimension of that grid is n by m. So n here refers to the rows of the grid. In this case, it is the doormats. If we have 7 rows like here, then we have 21 characters for 21 columns. In this challenge, the design should have the word welcome written in the center, and the design pattern should only use a bar and a period or a dot and hyphen. So these are the characters that you're allowed to use for this challenge. And in this case, you see here that at first in the middle, no matter how many columns we have this pattern, a dot, a bar, and a dot. And then on the next line, we have this pattern, but there are 2 more instances. So you see it here, that is one instance. And then you see it here, that is the second instance. And you also see it here. So here you have this pattern once. Then you have this pattern that is 1 plus 2, 3 times. And then here it appears 5 times. If you want to count rapidly, you can just count the number of bars. In this case, we have 5 bars here. Here we have 3 bars. And here we have 1 bar. In the middle, we have the word welcome. And then on the next row, the following row after welcome, we have the same amounts or the same number of patterns. As you can see below the word welcome. Then here we have 2 less instances. So you have 3 times that pattern. And then here you have it only once. So it's the same thing here. No matter how many rows we always have the first row. It has this pattern only once. And it expands until the middle when we print the word welcome. And then on the bottom half of this grid or the doormat design, we have the same pattern but reversed. So the numbers keep decreasing. We have more examples here, but one thing to note is that these patterns, whether it's the word welcome or the dots and the bars, they always appear in the center, and on the left and right sides, they have hyphens. So I've also made an example here with my own code. If I have 13 by 39, this is what it's going to look like. So it's the same thing as what you see here, but just that the grid dimensions are different. So now let's look at the code for this logic here. This here is in Python. So at first, we want to grab the inputs, which is n and then m. So for example, 9 and 27, this whole thing will be a string. So you need to split it first and then convert them to integers. So we have the integer 9 and also 27, and then you form a list out of them. So num inputs becomes a list of 2 elements where these elements are n and then m. And these here are for the rows of the grids and also the columns. So now we need to keep track of where we are in the design. Are we in the top half or in the bottom half? This bottom half right here. So I'm using the variable called reverse, and at first it is false because we are starting from the top half of the design. And I also have my counter here, which counts how many times we need to print that pattern, the dots and the bars. So this is dot, bar, dots. And I'm going to use that counter to control how many times I'm printing the pattern on every row. Now for every row inside of my range, the range here is num inputs index 0. So this is the value of n here, the value of the rows. I have from start all the way to the number of rows minus 1. If we are still in the top half, meaning reversed is currently set to false, then I'm going to print this pattern, dots, bar, and a dot, and I'm going to print it counter number of times. So counter times this pattern here. This is the amount of times I'm going to print that pattern consecutively. So if counter is 1, we're going to print this only once. If counter is 3 or 5 or 9, then we're going to print it 3 or 5 or 9 times. But whenever I'm printing it, I want to print it at the center of the current row. So you see here we have this function center. This is part of Python. You can use it for strings. And I want to pad it on the right and on the left with hyphens. However many hyphens are displayed, this depends entirely on the width that I'm allowing for this row. So the width here is controlled with this center function, where I'm saying the width should be the value for the columns. So remember here when we grab the inputs for num inputs, that was the second value here, that is for the columns. So num inputs index 1 is the number of columns on this design pattern, this grid if you want. We know that I can populate my rows with the correct amount of patterns, dots, bar, and then dots. And then I can have hyphens on the left and on the right to fill the entire row. Now on every row, remember like I explained before, we have an extra 2 instances of this pattern. So I have counter plus equals 2, and this updates the value of the counter variable. And I need to check now if I've reached the middle of my grids vertically. So if I'm here in my grids, for example, I started here, I kept printing, now I'm here. I need to check if the value of my row here, this local variable, is equal to the half of my value for the rows minus 1. This is how I'm going to find out if I reached the middle of my grids. Here we're doing an integer division. So if we are here, for example, then the half would be somewhere here. So we need to say minus 1, meaning currently the value of row is here. So if the value of row is here, I'm going to print welcome. So this will print welcome on the next row here. And I'm going to print it at the center. And I'm going to fill the entire space for that row with hyphens. And I'm going to set reverse to true. This means that from that point in my algorithm, I've indicated that I am now in the bottom half of the design. So this whole logic will no longer run. Now we're going to be here at every iteration. So here we had counter plus equals 2. We need to account for that now and decrement that value by 2. So this will allow us to print the same number of patterns, dots, bar, and dots as what we had here. Then once we are done printing this pattern, I'm going to decrement again because this is inside of a loop, a for loop. I'm going to decrement my value by 2 and I'm going to keep printing it. And of course, this is going to terminate once the range is fully covered. Now I'm going to run this code again. This is with my sample inputs, but I'm going to uncheck that box here and let's just submit it right away. So we have 6 test cases and we've passed everything. So that's it for designer doormat in Python. If you like my video, please subscribe and I'll see you next time.